Hello, students. This is the third lesson for 7th grade ELA, our second lesson on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And as you will recall, last lesson we reviewed the first few chapters and we read the incident of the letter together. I introduced you to these wonderful puppets. And in fact, where did I threw Mr. There he is. It's a long story. Okay, got all the puppets here. And the question that I want us to consider for this lesson is Jekyll indeed hiding Hyde, a fugitive from the law? That's what we're thinking about in these next couple of chapters. So something I wanted to draw your attention to. Do you remember last lesson that the word quaint was used to describe the fact that Jekyll and Hyde had the same handwriting? Do you remember that? That's the word that Mr. Guest, the handwriting expert, friend, and clerk for Mr. Utterson, used in order to describe the fact that there was that coincidence. And I remember kind of guessing at the meaning of the word. And the thing is, we shouldn't guess at meanings of words. I got my handy dictionary out. Dictionary. Every family should have several on several shelves. Sleep with one next to your bed. All that. Okay, so I looked up quaint because the interesting thing about language is language, it's not static. It grows with usage. And so the way you've grown accustomed to hearing a word used may not be perfectly in line with the original meaning of the word. So the word quaint means here unusual or different in character or appearance. That would make sense that it's unusual for Hyde and Jekyll to have the same handwriting. So think of the word quaint. Ladies, if you go to a fancy party and you've made your own dress and someone dressed to the nines in something bought from a store says, "Oh, how quaint," that's an insult. You know, you look like a country bumpkin. Oh, all right. But if that has a negative connotation. But if you come in and you're like Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink at the end, the final scene where she's made her own dress out of these two different dresses, and it's beautiful, it's different, and you're a breath of fresh air. That kind of quaint is a compliment. It has a positive connotation. If you haven't seen Pretty in Pink, perhaps it's time to say to your mother, "Is it time for me to watch Pretty in Pink?" Because we have time here, and we're watching movies as a family as well. So, all right, that's the word quaint. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and read to you two short chapters and discuss them, and the lovely puppets will be showing up. And so, The Remarkable Incident of Dr. Lanyon, page 61 if you have your copy. If you don't, regard me as your Audible, your audiobook, and listen in and enjoy. So time ran on. Thousands of pounds were offered in reward, for the death of Sir Danvers was resented as a public injury. But Mr. Hyde had disappeared out of the ken of the police as though he had never existed. Oof. And ken means the line of sight, the scope of knowledge. Much of his past was unearthed indeed, and all disreputable. Tales came out of the man's cruelty, at once so callous and violent, and of his vile life, of his strange associates, of the hatred that seemed to have surrounded his career, but of his present whereabouts, not a whisper. So Hyde is indeed a person of interest, and all of a sudden now stories are coming out of people they remember seeing Hyde do this or that, and none of it's any good. And so some of it may be true, but some of it may be gossip, because he's a figure for gossip. And don't you want to be interesting and be able to have a Hyde story too? Yes, I saw him. This happened. You know, so some of it might in fact be gossip. From the time he had left the house in Soho on the morning of the murder, he was simply blotted out. And gradually, as time grew on, Mr. Utterson began to recover from the hotness of his alarm. So initially Utterson he's quite worried that his friend is hiding a murderer. Okay? Gradually he returns to his calm lawyer-like self. Okay, so he grew more quiet with himself. The death of Sir Danvers was, to his way of thinking, more than paid for by the disappearance of Hyde, which is kind of a callous thing to say. It's worth the death for Hyde to have been blotted out, he's saying. Now that the evil influence had been withdrawn, a new life began for Dr. Jekyll. He came out of his seclusion, removed relations with his friends, became once more their familiar guest and entertainer, and whilst he had always been known for charities, he was now no less distinguished for his religion. So he's back to being himself, social, friendly, charitable, and now even very religious, which is something to ponder. Maybe this guy wants to get right with God. Okay? He was busy. He was much in the open air. He did good. His face seemed to open and brighten, as if with an inward consciousness of service, and for more than 2 months the doctor was at peace. On the 8th of January, Utterson had dined at the doctor's with a small party. Lanyon had been there, and the face of the host looked from one to the other, as in the old days when the trio were inseparable friends. So Lanyon, Hyde, and Utterson together, friendly, forgetting their quarrel over science. Everyone is friendly once again. On the 12th and then again on the 14th, the door was shut against the lawyer. The doctor was confined to the house, Poole said, and saw no one. On the 15th he tried again and was again refused. And having now been used for the last 2 months to see his friend almost daily, he found this return of solitude to weigh upon his spirits. The 5th night he had guest to dine with him, and the 6th he betook himself to Dr. Lanyon's. So Utterson, he's just trying to pay a social call on Jekyll, pops in a few times, is told by his butler, no, he's not seeing anyone. He's secluded. This concerns Utterson because it seems like the way Jekyll had been behaving when Hyde was in his life. So he's going to go to Lanyon's house and see what's going on. What's the scoop? There at last he was not denied admittance, at least, But when he came in, he was shocked at the change which had taken place in the doctor's appearance. He had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. The rosy man had grown pale. His flesh had fallen away. He was visibly balder and older. And yet it was not so much these tokens of a swift physical decay that arrested the lawyer's notice, as a look in the eye and a quality of manner that seemed to testify to some deep-seated terror of mind. Okay, so goes to see Lanyon. Lanyon looks like this, so startled his glasses have fallen off. Take note. He is not only physically looking as if he's aged and unwell, but there's something on his mind, it's obvious. Please stop digging in the carpet, dog. I don't know if you could hear that. But something is on his mind as well. It was unlikely that the doctor should fear death. He's a healthy man. And yet, that was what Utterson was tempted to suspect. Yes, he thought, he is a doctor. He must know his own state, and that his days are counted, and the knowledge is more than he can bear. And yet when Utterson remarked on his ill looks, it was with an air of great firmness that Lanyon declared himself a doomed man. I have had a shock, he said, and I shall never recover. It is a question of weeks. Well, life has been pleasant. I liked it. Yes, sir, I used to like it. I sometimes think if we knew all, we should be more glad to get away. Jekyll is ill too, observed Utterson. Have you seen him? But Lanyon's face changed, and he held up a trembling hand. I wish to see and hear no more of Dr. Jekyll, he said in a loud, unsteady voice. I am quite done with that person. I beg that you will spare me any allusion to one whom I regard as dead. Tut, tut, said Mr. Utterson. And then after a considerable pause, can't I do anything? We are 3 very old friends, Lanyon. We shall not live to make others. Nothing can be done. Ask himself. He will not see me, said the lawyer. I'm not surprised at that. Some day, Utterson, after I am dead, you may perhaps come to learn the right and wrong of this. I cannot tell you. And in the meantime, if you can sit and talk with me of other things, for God's sake, stay and do so. But if you cannot keep clear of this accursed topic, then in God's name, go, for I cannot bear it. Strong words. As soon as he got home, Utterson sat down and wrote to Jekyll, complaining of his exclusion from the house and asking the cause of his unhappy break with Lanyon. Okay, so he sits down, writes to Jekyll, and the letter is basically, hey man, how come when I come to see you, you don't let me in? Well, what's going on? Why are you hiding out? By the way, Lanyon looks horrible, and he's really mad at you again. What's going on? What's going on? Okay, and so it's interesting because we're told in the beginning that Utterson, not a nosy guy, is kind of a nosy guy, but who wouldn't be nosy in this kind of situation, right? Okay. The next day brought him a long answer from Jekyll, often very pathetically worded and sometimes darkly mysterious in drift. The quarrel with Lanyon was incurable. I do not blame our old friend, Jekyll wrote, but I share his view that we must never meet. I mean from henceforth to lead a life of extreme seclusion. You must not be surprised, nor must you doubt my friendship if my door is often shut, even to you. You must suffer me to go my own dark way. I have brought on myself a punishment and a danger that I cannot name. If I am the chief of sinners, I am the chief of sufferers also. I could not think that this earth contained a place for sufferings and terrors so unmanning, and you can do but one thing, Utterson, to lighten this destiny, and that is to respect my silence. So his letter, yes, Lanyon and I aren't friends anymore, and it can't be fixed. And I know in part it's my fault. I am a sinner and I suffer. The world is darker than we even can begin to comprehend. Friend, for you're my friend, I can't see you anymore, and I'm still going to be your friend, but let me go my own way. Let me be. Don't ask me any more questions. Utterson was amazed. The dark influence of Hyde had been withdrawn. The doctor had returned to his old tasks and amities, so his old habits, pleasures. A week ago, the prospect had smiled with every promise of a cheerful and honored age, and now in a moment, friendship and peace of mind, and the whole tenor of his life were wrecked. So great and unprepared a change pointed to madness. But in view of Lanyon's manner and words, there must lie for it some deeper ground. So he begins to think once again, well, is Dr. Jekyll losing his mind? But then he knows that if Lanyon sees Jekyll and is panicked, it can't be madness. There has to be something more substantial as the root for the problem. A week afterwards, Dr. Lanyon took to his bed, and in something less than a fortnight, he was dead. The night after the funeral, at which he had been sadly affected, Utterson locked the door of his business room, and sitting there by the light of a melancholy candle, drew out and set before him an envelope addressed by the hand and sealed with the seal of his dead friend. So Lanyon has a letter to be read by Utterson posthumously after his death. Private, it says, these are the words, for the hands of J.G. Utterson alone, and in case of his predecease, if he dies before I die, to be destroyed unread. So it was emphatically superscribed, and the lawyer dreaded to behold the contents. So, given a letter, told not to read it until someone has died. I'll tell you what, it'd be a hard letter not to read, wouldn't it? I don't know if I have that strength of self-control or character. I think I'd find a way for the letter to sort of accidentally open and kind of falls out by accident. You sort of go by it and you accidentally read it. But I don't have the self-control of J.G. Utterson. Okay, going on. I have buried one friend today, he thought. What if this should cost me another? And then he condemned the fear as disloyalty and broke the seal. So he thinks to himself, what if what's in this letter makes me have to stop being friends with Jekyll? And then he thinks, oh no, I can't think those thoughts. I have to be more loyal to my friend. Within there was another enclosure likewise sealed. Are you kidding me? And marked upon the cover as not to be opened until the death or disappearance of Dr. Henry Jekyll. Utterson could not trust his eyes. Yes, it was his disappearance. Here again, as in the mad will which he had long ago restored to its author, here again was the idea of a disappearance in the name of Henry Jekyll, bracketed. So, think about that. Just like it said in the will, if I die or disappear, and here Lanyon's word, if he dies or disappears. A strange coincidence. Quaint, one might say. Quaint. Okay. But in the will, the idea had sprung from the suggestion of the man Hyde. It was set there with a purpose too plain and horrible. So Jekyll had it put in the will because he was thinking about killing, Hyde put it in the will because he was thinking about killing Jekyll. That's what Utterson thinks. But now, why has it been written there by Lanyon? What should it mean? A great curiosity came to the trustee to disregard the prohibition and dive at once to the bottom of these mysteries. But professional honor and faith in his dead friend were stringent obligations, and the packet slept in the inmost corner of his private safe. So honor and friendship keep him from digging open those envelopes. Whew, you have any friendship that strong? Is your honor that solid? That's something to aim for, isn't it? It is one thing to mortify curiosity, another to conquer it, and it may be doubted if from that day forth Utterson desired the society of his surviving friend with the same eagerness. So before, Utterson had been eager to see Jekyll. Now, not so much. He doesn't want to end up like this, and then like this. Right? Okay, he doesn't want to end up dead. So, he thought of him kindly, but his thoughts were disquieted and fearful. He went to call, indeed, but was perhaps relieved to be denied admittance. Perhaps in his heart he preferred to speak with the pool on the doorstep, and surrounded by the air and sounds of the open city, rather than to be admitted into the house of voluntary bondage, and to sit and speak with its inscrutable recluse. So think about someone putting bars on windows to keep themselves within. And inscrutable, mysterious, can't be figured out recluse, someone who is hiding from the world. Who would want to go in there, right? Though the curiosity is still pretty strong. Poole had indeed no very pleasant news to communicate. The doctor, it appeared, now more than ever, confined himself to the cabinet over the laboratory, where he would sometimes even sleep. He was out of spirits, he had grown very silent. He did not read. It seemed as if he had something on his mind. Utterson became so used to the unvarying character of these reports that he fell off little by little in the frequency of his visits. The next chapter is very short. I am going to take a quick drink, beg your pardon, crazy water, the water of Dr. Jekyll. Refreshing, tastes like madness and secrets. Okay, going on, brief chapter, then we'll be done with this lesson. Incident at the window. It chanced on Sunday, when Mr. Utterson was on his usual walk with Mr. Enfield. Remember from the beginning, again, my son Dan made him a modern boy with a smartphone. They're on their usual Sunday walk, that their way lay once again through the by-street, and when they came to the front of the door, they both stopped to gaze at it. Here's the door, once again. Ah, the door from the beginning. The door which brings forth the first story about Hyde and the girl he trampled. Well, said Enfield, that story is at an end at least. We shall never see more of Hyde. I hope not, said Utterson. Did I ever tell you that I once saw him and shared your feeling of repulsion? It was impossible to do one without the other, returned Enfield. So To see Hyde is to be repulsed by him. And by the way, what an ass you must have thought me not to know that this was the back way to Dr. Jekyll's. It was partly your own fault that I found out, even when I did. Ah, so you found out, did you? Said Utterson. But if that be so, we may step into the into the court and take a look in the windows. To tell you the truth, I am uneasy about poor Jekyll, and even outside I feel as if the presence of a friend might do him good. So, remember, this is the door to the back laboratory, then there's a courtyard, and then the front entrance where Jekyll's main quarters are. So a courtyard, think kind of maybe some trees and grass, some benches, where you can then look in on the building. All right. The court was very cool and a little damp and full of premature twilight, although the sky high up overhead was still bright with sunset, though it's actually clear rather than foggy. Could that be some kind of indication from the author that some clarity is coming? Perhaps. The middle one of these three windows was halfway open, and sitting close beside it, taking the air with an infinite sadness of mien, so a sad face, like some disconsolate prisoner, Utterson saw Dr. Jekyll. So Jekyll's looking out the window. Oh! That's Hyde. See, this is why the puppets are here. Jekyll. There he is, looking out the window, but looking like he wishes he could go out and play. What, Jekyll? He cried. I trust you are better? I am very low, Utterson, replied the doctor drearily. Very low. It will not last long, thank God. You stay too much indoors, said the lawyer. You should be out, whipping up the circulation like Mr. Enfield and me, so getting your blood pumping. This is my cousin, Mr. Enfield. It's Dr. Jekyll. See the good manners there, introducing. He's in the window. Hello, hello, nice to meet you, of course. Come now, get your hat and take a quick turn with us. You're very good, sighed the other. I should like to very much, but no, it is quite impossible. I dare not. But indeed, Utterson, I am very glad to see you. It really is a great pleasure. I would ask you and Mr. Enfield up, but the place really is not fit. Why then, said the lawyer good-naturedly, the best thing we can do is stay down here and speak with you from where we are. That is just what I was about to venture to propose, returned the doctor, with a smile. But the words were hardly uttered before the smile was struck out of his face and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze the blood of the two gentlemen below. They saw it before a glimpse, for the window was instantly thrust down. But the glimpse had been sufficient, and they turned and left the courtyard without a word. So here we have Jekyll looking out. Suddenly this face, terror then despair. So terror, despair. Oh. Those are my dogs. Terror and despair set them up. Then the window comes right down. So terror, think terror, despair. Then he pulls the window down to hide behind it, right? The gentlemen, they take off, stunned, a cold-blooded sweat breaking out. Hey, Mitzi! Oh! She's being... Okay, I think they're going to settle down now. Okay. In silence, too, they traversed the by-street, and it was not until they had come into a neighboring thoroughfare, where even upon a Sunday there were still some stirrings of life, that Mr. Utterson at last turned and looked at his companion. So they want to go and rejoin the living. They want to be in a public place. If you've ever felt that way, alone and frightened, and just being around other people makes you feel better. They were both pale, and there was an answering horror in their eyes. So horror. Horror. God forgive us, said Mr. Utterson. But Mr. Enfield only nodded his head very seriously and walked on once more in silence. So, those are the next two chapters there. I apologize for my dogs. They're yippy and dippy. At any rate, it will be good to talk to you again next lesson. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and it's helping your understanding of the text. Toodaloo!